So talent focus. So that's sort of in line with what I was talking about earlier. One, narrowing down the kinds of skills and competencies that you want, but also making sure your organization is ready for that. That it has become that these HR processes are integrated into the overall business strategy. One of the ways that you can do that is who gives performance evaluations every year? Every year you get a performance evaluation, right? Right. And then the person sitting across from you, they're like, yeah, that's great, okay, I'll work on that, what's my raise? Right? Is it 3%, 4%? If you're doing really well, 5%? So that's all they're hearing, right? They're just trying to get to the bottom line, like how much more money am I gonna make? $10 a week, woohoo, kind of thing. If you really wanna start developing this kinds of things, you have to kind of have a separate conversation about talent and what these people are capable of doing. Who's capable of doing what in your company? So, where do we need to focus? What kind of rewards do we want to give people? How do we want to develop the pipeline? Do we want to move them around the company so they are exposed to different areas of the business? Do we just want to set them on a goal for being outside sales and just doing all sales things? How much of that do you want to integrate into the process? Making sure it happens. So as part of this, another way to illustrate it is having these two forces of change, right? The kind that drive it and the kind that release it. So right now we're in the driving stage. We're trying to figure it out. You're trying to get to the end. You're doing all your plans, you're doing all your procedures, you're doing all your processes, you have a strategy, you have a mission, right? That's the driving part of it. The other element is releasing it. So making sure that you have the steps in place that you want to and actually following through and having a consistent message. The drive and the release component. Any questions so far? Okay. As long as I've been working at NAED, this is one of the main hot topics that keeps coming up over and over and over again. How do we attract talent? How many people here are having issues getting people into their company? Why do you think that is? Unqualified?
I was going to say that's it more than anything. I don't think it's hard to find people in fog and mirror. I think it is more difficult to find people that really want to be something when they grow up.
I think that's the challenge. Because it seems like, too, people are growing up later, in a sense, because I remember when I hit college and you were out on your own at 22 and doing what you needed to do to make a career. Now I look at like my younger brother and his generation, they really didn't get going until like 26, 27, 28. So it seems like, huh? Exactly. So there's this delayed start, it seems like, with this particular group. And so they're not really thinking about what they want to do when they grow up. And like I said, if they go to a job and they're not happy with it, they're not afraid to move. So you have to get them get them invested right from the beginning. There was a statistic out there that people decide to stay with their companies within the first 90 days of their employment. Whether they stay for 5 years, 6 months, they've made that decision within the first 3 months of their employment. So you have to get them hooked. You have to get them hooked almost immediately. And in doing so, and you have to get people vested in interest, and this just goes part to the larger conversation about our industry, is just sort of rebranding our industry to make it interesting, to make people know about it. So some of the things that PA Consulting suggested, of course, those tried and true things. Going to colleges, having a college fair, doing campus interviews, not afraid to use social media and getting your name out there. Also, if you need to rebrand your company to make it interesting, do it. Because if the buzz around town is that you're not a great company to work for, no one's going to come and want to work for you. So you have to really think about those overall strategies with your company when trying to invest in talent. So like I said, it starts to become part of a multi-pronged approach and trying to get people on board with your company. The other thing I wanted to mention, and we had a distributor in here earlier that said, and he made a suggestion and it's been very successful for them, is internships. A couple of them have done internships, and they just go to colleges, get these kids to come in and work for the summer. Some of them are paid and some of them are unpaid, and they see the opportunities that are available. And it can't be that hard because you go to the university and there's always students looking for work trying to add to their resume. So you build that kind of relationship and maybe get 2 or 3 of them in there. And they've had a lot of success. Most of the time they get 75% of the kids that want to stay, young adults, sorry, that want to stay. And then 25 they can, like, no, you're not a good fit. They could weed themselves out. So it's another opportunity to think about internships too. And as part of, as I just mentioned about that branding of your own company within your community, you have to think about it from the employee standpoint. There's been this shift in that people used to say, you know what, you should be grateful you have a job. I'm happy to have you, but you should be grateful to have a job and fall in line, right? That thinking is very much switched because there's not as much competition as there used to be. Back 20 years ago, people were vying for jobs, right? It was highly competitive. That's not the case anymore. So you have to make your brand name known, get the name out there, and be a good place to work. Now, to make all this happen, of course, you have to have a lot of discussions and you have to have a plan in place and everybody has to be on the same page. So again, just going back to your senior management and they have to be on board with what you're doing. Okay, identify. Okay, so you attracted these people, they're in your company. Now, how am I going to figure out who's going to be a great leader? And really what it boils down to, right, is performance and potential. How many people have gone into a store and been waited on by somebody and goes, you know what, you might make a good fit for my company. Or like, you're a good salesperson, have you ever considered this? Somebody ever done that? Yeah. Joe, in our earlier session, now granted, he studies human behavior, but he will go to the big box stores. He'll go to Lowe's or Home Depot on the weekend, and he will just look at all the salespeople on the floor. And inevitably, you find the one person that's a standout associate. And he just watches them. And he goes, you know what, that might be a good person. And somebody else in the room did it too. They had gone to Home Depot and they'd been going to the store for months and months, and there was this always, it didn't matter what department he was in, he was always so helpful to him. And he's like, do you want to work here anymore? So sometimes it's just going out and keeping your eyes open to what's around you. So I know what everybody's going to do this weekend, right? You're all going to go to Home Depot and like stalk the salespeople, right?
We have a manager from Home Depot.
You did?
We hired somebody did such a great job in the commercial department working with us on pricing because they had a silly Romex deal. So we turned around and we hired him.
Nice, see? And they've worked out?
Yeah, he started in sales, worked in a couple branches, now he's a branch manager.
Great, great. So sometimes it's just that gut feeling about somebody too, knowing what they'll be able to do. So much of my presentation is lifted from the actual report that we published earlier in the summer. So I'm happy to provide the slides and happy to provide you a copy of the report if you want to give me your business card at the end of the presentation. But just for discussion purposes, I wanted to mention this idea of performance and potential. So performance, that's pretty easy to track, right? You have your sales goals, you have whatever goals you need, and you can say boom, 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 you're meeting them or you're not. But when it comes to potential, how on earth do you measure that? How on earth do you identify that? And part of it is what the employees think. Do you think they aspire to more senior roles? And more importantly, do you think they have what it takes to take on that extra responsibility? So that's what we're talking about. So performance, right, that's easy. It's the potential thing that is the very tricky part of this whole matter. Okay. So to help build some momentum and help decide who should go where and what should, what people should be doing, it's really important for management and HR to have a talent review meeting. And you can make it as complex or as complicated as you want. But basically, you just kind of go over the employees and you know what? That Mark guy, he's good. We need to keep our eye on him. Or, perhaps Sue's not living up to what she needs to do. And so you have these meetings, you can have them annually, every few months, whatever your schedule allows, just to ask these questions to make sure that management and HR are on the same page. And so I just wanted to bring up this slide and kind of on the right, there's a sample agenda of things that you can talk about. Like I said, we have lots of tools. Here's just something else that you could print out if you wanted. So once you've had identified these people, right, then you need an action plan, right? It's great to talk about all these people and be like, yeah, that person, they're dynamite, we're gonna do this and this. You actually have to have a plan of action and implement it. So these are some of the things that can be done. And not all of it is about moving people up. It's also maybe about moving people around. Maybe someone is not doing such a great job in a department, and you feel they'd be best moved somewhere else. Perhaps a person who seems to have such a great dynamic and really seems to have the potential to go all the way up to the top, perhaps they have a coworker that might not be helping them meet all their potential. So even taking a look at not only the individual, but perhaps the context in which they're working and who they might be working with is also something else to consider. And if you really want to get fancy about it, you can do a fancy matrix. No, I'm kidding. Actually, this is pretty simple. You can do a matrix. So that way, you have the processes in place and they're formalized, and you can be able to track who is going to be moved up, what they're doing. Perhaps they're not meeting muster and you have to have a talk with them. All right. So this is one way to go about it. These used to be kind of taboo. It was like a branding exercise. You know, you give somebody a number and saying, you know what, I don't know. But this is just a different way to look at it. So the green is the good, right? Green is good. And so once you have this person identified, then you can maybe work with how you want to have an action plan. And again, formalizing this process. So the management comes in and goes, all right, so, you know, they're doing all right. They have some support. What do you think I should do? So you can have this matrix in place and be like, okay, well, here's what we've decided upon. Here's what we're going to do. All right, so having these processes formalized can really help push it forward and really integrate into the overall business strategy. I used to teach, so I love Venn diagrams, so I had to put this in here. So, high potential employee. They aspire for promotion, to have more responsibility. You see that they have the ability to do it, and they're engaged with the company. Earlier in the morning session, somebody brought up, like, okay, well, that's great. It's great to have all these different tracking systems and matrices, but how do I know if somebody is sitting in front of me if they're going to be a high potential? How can I do that? A couple different things. Lots of people go the interviewing process, they do those competency behavior types of interviews, and you can go Google them online and they'll show you example questions of these competencies. And those kinds of questions are, tell me about a time you had a difficult customer, or tell me about a time that you had a complicated situation. What did you do? How did you resolve it? And Joe mentioned something that was very interesting. He goes, if the person sitting across from you goes into a lot of detail, seems to be very observant, not just about their actions, but the actions of the customer and what they were doing, then that person is probably a high potential. If somebody's sitting across from you and is like, you know what, they were wrong and I just had to make it happen, but you know, I didn't agree with what this person did, it's probably not somebody you want in your company. But if somebody goes, you know, I knew this customer was wrong, but I took these steps and we mitigated the situation. So just listening in that interview can tell you so much about how this person is going to perform. Because inevitably, even though people do a lot of interview prep, once they get comfortable and they see that you're listening, they're going to let their true light shine. All right? Not always, about 85% of the time. All right? I know some people said that they've had their snakes. They gave great interviews and they were terrible workers. Unfortunately, that's just kind of the side of doing business. And one of the negative things, and I don't have a magic answer for you. Going, when a person walks in your doors and they have a little star behind their name, like this person.
How long do you give somebody to fail? How quick before you jettison them?
Sometimes, within the first week. There's always some kind of red flags. I know most companies have the 90-day, and kind of by day 45, you're having a talk with your peers.
And that's going to change because of the Affordable Care Act. 90 days is not good anymore.
Didn't even know that. See, I need to let Joe know that so we can frame that accordingly.
It's like 60 or something where you have to offer them benefits after a certain amount of time. Okay. It's a lot shorter than 90.
Okay, so day 30. Okay.
Well, it's around 60. I forget exactly what it is.
Yeah.
But around 70, and I moved up too long.
It doesn't mean you have to keep them on.
No, but if you do, you have to offer them benefits.
But usually there's red flags, right, if somebody's not going to fit, usually.